All right, Sophia, it is 12 o'clock and we're ready to get started.
Hi, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Sophia Fantus, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Texas, Arlington. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm really honored to be moderating this virtual Pride event today, both over Zoom and Facebook Live. If you have any questions or comments over the course of this panel, you can type your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if you're using Zoom. This is separate from that chat function. And for Facebook Live attendees, you can enter your questions in the comment section of the live video. We'll be moderating them throughout. I want to wish everybody a happy Pride as we come together to celebrate our small victories and long fought battles. And as we mark every Pride to remember where we've come from and what we've gained, this Pride is no different. Although it seems as though everything has changed and turned our world upside down with added health and mental health worries, we come together today to engage in a conversation about social justice and to consider ways to outreach across our communities safely and with intention. This panel is only the start of a conversation about how this pandemic has impacted LGBTQ+ communities, and particularly how this intersects with race and the Black Lives Matter movement. Before we move to our panelists, though, I want to provide a bit of context for those who may not be familiar with some of the issues. First, when I say LGBTQ+, I want to inform those who may not be familiar with the acronym that it stands for gay, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. The plus sign represents those who may not feel included in the original acronym of LGBT, including those who identify as gender queer or gender non-binary, those who are questioning, asexual, intersex, and two-spirit. I remind folks that I personally also use the plus sign to indicate the terms are constantly changing and in flux, and to remain inclusive to those who may not identify with any of these fixed categories. I want to start by saying that with everything going on today, we are reminded as to how and why Pride started. Perhaps we all have a vision of Pride in our mind, right? We think about the parades, the water guns being sprayed, floats, fun music. But Pride didn't start as a parade. Pride started as a protest. In 1969, the Stonewall Uprising started with a brick being thrown at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York City to prevent a police raid. It started because of the enduring anger, exhaustion, and fear across LGBTQ+ communities against police brutality, transphobia, biphobia, and homophobia. It was fighting against the lack of systemic legal and social protections and regulations that mark sexual and gender diversity as deviant and immoral. It's important to note that the Stonewall Uprisings were the first stages of the gay liberation movement, and it was actually started by trans women of color, who to this day are still fighting against these same issues. I say this because it's important to draw attention to the whitewashing of Stonewall across movies, books, and television shows, and to acknowledge the disproportionate violence against trans women of color. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, and when we say their names, we must include the names of Rhea Milton, Dominique Fells, and Monica Diamond, just to name a few. So much has changed since Stonewall, but there are so many more changes that still need to happen. Many of you may know that the Supreme Court just granted federal protection in the workplace to LGBT communities. This is a huge landmark decision. However, the law actually silences the voices of bisexual identified individuals, leading to confusion whether bisexuals are still protected under the law. They are. Yet, just the week prior to this announcement, the same day of the anniversary of the Pulse shootings in Florida that killed 49 people at a gay nightclub, and the same week of the anniversary of marriage equality, the administration announced plans to remove anti-discrimination healthcare laws that protect transgender patients, all in the midst of a pandemic. Members of the LGBTQ+ community already have a distrust of the healthcare system. Many do not have a family healthcare provider, but use the emergency room for fear of being misgendered, being called their name assigned at birth, having to disclose and explain their sexual and gender identity, and anticipating a lack of training and competencies. The backtrack of these laws will only fuel avoidance of hospitals and delays in gender-affirming care, specifically at a time when transgender persons of color are being disproportionately impacted by the virus and by violence. Part of this fear or distrust of the medical system also stems from the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and the stigmatization against gay men. AIDS was called the gay disease, and the administration at the time didn't even want to talk about or name AIDS. Similarities can now be seen with COVID-19 and the way in which stigma has particularly impacted Asian and Asian American communities. The history of stigmatization against LGBTQ plus communities is long-standing, and Pride has always been a way to reach out and build community networks. Pride is one of the main times where mobile testing sites are accessed by those who are younger and who've been previously untested for HIV and STIs. Without in-person Pride events, there are fewer community health outreach opportunities, as well as safe spaces. I'm sure a lot of you have been engaged in discussions on how domestic violence has actually heightened in the time of COVID-19 due to social and physical distancing regulations. Intimate partner violence is prevalent across LGBTQ plus communities. Recent studies have reported that 61% of bisexual women, 44% of lesbian women, 37% of bisexual men, and 26% of gay men experience IPV in their lifetime. With few resources that are inclusive of LGBTQ plus identities, COVID has made it much harder for those in violent and abusive relationships to seek help. In thinking about this forum, we also have to remain attuned and cognizant of the privilege of digital literacy and technological access. Many in our communities may not have access to Wi-Fi or computers, especially ones that are private. For LGBTQ plus youth who have moved back home and perhaps back in the closet because of unaccepting and toxic environments, online attendance may not be possible. Texas is actually one of the biggest providers of conversion therapy or reparative therapy that uses physical, psychological, and emotional abuse to coerce someone to fix or change their sexual orientation or gender identity. In the past, in-person Pride events could be attended without fear of parental disclosure to elicit connection, support, and belonging. Older LGBTQ plus adults may also face obstacles in navigating online social support networks. Older LGBTQ plus individuals already face higher health and mental health disparities than their non-LGBTQ plus counterparts, and COVID-19 has only exacerbated these issues. Older LGBTQ plus adults are an at-risk group for COVID, and fears of losing loved ones and partners may bring back the grief, loneliness, and traumas of the AIDS epidemic. As we move forward, I want to say to everyone that this is a safe, inclusive, and affirming space. Our panelists are sharing details of their own lived experiences, so let us all be respectful and mindful of this courage when we listen, comment, and ask questions. Let's remain attuned to the strength and resilience of our panelists and the courageous work that LGBTQ plus communities and organizations are doing during this time. I also want to acknowledge those who were interested in participating, but who are not yet ready to share, reminding us that fears of stigma, discrimination, and prejudice still exist. Their experiences are every bit as meaningful, critical, and valid as those who are speaking today. So without further ado, I hand over the virtual mic to Jessica Sanchez. Her pronouns are she, her, and hers. She is the Assistant Director of the LGBTQ plus program and Pride Peers here at the University of Texas, Arlington. Jessica.
Sophia, thank you so much. What a great introduction. I had goosebumps multiple times. I appreciate everything you said. And I appreciate you so much for wanting to collaborate. And the School of Social Work has always been a strong partner. You are definitely my strongest partner when it comes to talking about LGBTQ plus topics. And again, I greatly appreciate you and all the work behind the scenes with all of our social work staff that have truly made this event become possible today. So like Sophia was saying multiple times, essentially when I hear her, I hear the importance of every single institution having an LGBTQ plus program, right? With everything that has been going on in our society, in our world, on top of COVID. When we look at our students, right away, our biggest need, and like Sophia was talking about earlier, was essentially with students having to move home that were living on campus. When we were talking about this earlier, I had told, in conversation that decision was made, one, for safety, but two, with a lot of privilege. And I say with a lot of privilege because a lot of my students having to pick up their things and move back home to an environment that is not accepting, automatically triggered one of the greatest needs with the LGBTQ plus program. And that essentially was making sure that I could get my students back on campus into emergency housing that we have available. And a lot of folks don't know that. So, I cannot see you, and I don't know who is all attending, but I hope that is something that kind of sticks in your mind and as a major takeaway today, is that the LGBTQ plus program, our number one priority is advocacy for sexual minority students on this campus. And when we think of the housing needs that automatically flourish because of COVID and because of harmful, toxic, unaccepting environments that existed in these homes, having to relocate then triggers financial need, then triggers food security, which then translates into clothing. And know that the students that I was there to support, we very much help right along the way. So we're making sure that the student is taken care of in its entirety. It's not getting them relocated and then that's it. And so essentially emergency housing, right, was one of our greatest needs. And the students that I was serving, disproportionately students of color. Okay. With that, our second greatest need was hormone replacement therapy and access to maintaining what they needed to, continue to move forward with their journey and transitioning, because a lot of agencies had to close down, or they were just getting ready to begin the process only to be told, I'm sorry, this cannot move forward at this time. And, the anxiety, the stress that was associated with that was, something that was a lot of, and getting actually connected to counselors that could assist with that. And so the LGBTQ plus program, at the end of the day, I really just wanted to make sure to come on this panel and just highlight that we are here to advocate and support our students. We're always contracting for safety. That is our number one priority. And then I'm always asking about academic success. I think what a lot of folks fail to realize, especially even though we are in the world of higher education, is that when our students are constantly having to code switch as our form of resiliency, as our form of survival on college campuses, especially if they're not able to live, or perfect example, like we were talking about with COVID and having to go back into a home that possibly is not accepting, that can translate into how can I maintain my academics? How can I continue to thrive in the classroom? And so essentially that is what we are here for. And we are here to educate this community as a whole on the importance of truly being an advocate for sexual minority students on campus. With that, I just want to definitely end with our advocacy services are all the way through. It's not just we only do XYZ. It's if a student simply needs us to go to a medical appointment because they feel like their provider is not going to treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve, I will absolutely be seated next to a student to ensure that they are treated with that. If they need access to legal resources, mental health resources, HRT, we are here for them to ensure. I just also want to highlight that UT Arlington has made tremendous strides because we do have some awesome leadership in our positions. And I say that with on our way to becoming a inclusive campus. I just want to highlight what we are doing. So students who come, especially if you're on this call and you're an incoming freshman, a transfer student, any student status, and you do not have a legal name change, I want you to know that at UT Arlington, you are able to simply send me an email or the LGBTQ plus program an email, and I will make sure that OIT gets your email and your Canvas updated without a legal name change. All right, so you are treated with the respect and dignity that you deserve, that you are using, professors are using the correct name, you are being used with the correct pronouns. So that is a service that we provide. I also want you to know a huge success that just recently came about was that students are allowed to use their chosen name now on their degrees without any type of legal name requirement. That was one that we have been advocating for a while, and we just finally got that passed. So that was a huge step in the right direction, right, on making sure that we are essentially being inclusive as possible with our students. There are many more things. I don't want to take up too much time because I know we have great conversation. But again, I just appreciate you, Sophia, so much for collaborating, everyone that's here, thank you so much for your time and for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. And students of any gender and sexual identity, I want you to know that you're always seen, heard, and recognized on UT Arlington's campus, and that we are truly here to make sure that you have the advocacy and support that you need, and taking up as much space as possible, because the LGBTQ+ program is only growing, and therefore, more opportunities, right? So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was incredible. And I totally support that any student who needs support and advocacy to reach out to Jessica and the LGBTQ+ program, because they do such incredible advocacy work. So Jessica, you are right by my side in that. Our next panelist is Jane Rogers, the chairperson of the Social Engagement Committee of the Coalition for Aging LGBT in Tarrant County. Jane.
I have to get myself unmuted. Hello, everyone, and happy Pride. We're at the end of Pride, and I think it's been one of the most unusual Pride seasons that I have been a part of, as many of you can relate to. I want to thank the UT Arlington Social Work Department and Sophia for putting on this really important program. I'm really excited to be a part of this. As my role as the chair of the Social Engagement Committee for the Coalition for Aging for LGBT of Tarrant County. And I do want to introduce you to this great organization. We have been operating in North Texas for about 5 years. We were led into this endeavor by Cannon Flowers, who is the founding member of the coalition. And we have a great board, coordinating council, led by Carolyn Roney and Sandy Anderson, and one of the founding members of the board, Robert Emery. So I want to thank them for their leadership. As I said, we've been operating in Tarrant County and North Texas since 2015. And this is a North Texas endeavor, including the counties of Collin, Denton, Dallas, and Tarrant County. Just to give you some background on this, it's estimated right now that there are about 150,000 LGBTQ plus people that are ages 50 to 85 and over in this area. So we have a lot of lives to cover and a lot of advocacy to do for the senior community in this area. By 2040, there are going to be about 200,000, 250,000 of us in this area. So we have a lot of programming to do, and a lot of need the backup, I will say, of the younger LGBT community. We always say that we need younger friends in our life right now, and as we go forward. So we'll be visiting with you a lot in the coming years. I want to go over our mission, which is to improve and protect the quality of life of older LGBT adults in North Texas through coordination and collaboration for health, housing, advocacy, financial security, and social engagement. And that pretty well covers what anyone in the general population needs for their lives, and we are no different. It's a little bit of a twist when you're in a senior age group. Some of the unique problems and challenges that face the senior LGBTQ plus community. Number one is loneliness, maybe due to the loss of a life partner or a long-term relationship breaks up. Many of us have no children, or we're limited in our families being available and accepting of us, especially in our later years. We have loss of interest in personal enrichment activities due to the fact that as we get older, we're not into bars, we're not into clubs. We may lose a lot of our social identity. And as we know, people change as they get older. People are moving to different parts of the country, perhaps to be with family. And so we lose a lot of those relationships that we have formed through our life. Culinary skills, eating is not, we may not be good cooks. Eating well as we age is definitely a problem, and that impacts our health. And we also do not have currently very many LGBTQ plus welcoming transition living facilities, such as independent living, senior apartments, and certainly as we go into the assisted living and the nursing home arena. And we all know a lot of the really bad news from the nursing homes as we've been in the COVID-19 era here in the last 3 or 4 months. It seems like years, but it's really only been about 4 months for us. We have lack of social settings and groups. We have unique financial and legal situations that members face because we do not have protection still of equality for our community. We're getting there, but we are not there yet. We also, I think, like the general population, there's not a lot of understanding as you go into the senior years about the understanding of the aging process and how that impacts us. And we also have a lot of grief that we go through. I have personally experienced this in my life just through losing family members, friends. And of course, this is I think there's a great deal of fear right now with COVID-19 for people, to get out. Is it safe to go to the grocery store? We actually do, I have to admit, fear getting this virus because the likelihood of us, not being very ill or perhaps dying is in front of us every day. So let me go over just for a moment some of the things that the Coalition for Aging LGBT has done as part of our programming. In the last 3 or 4 years, we have sponsored 3 summits on LGBTQ aging in this area. We have created programming that focuses on all of the areas of our mission. Our board of directors represents our organization as advocates for the senior population, and by giving presentations such as the one that we're here today. And we have social engagement committee that does just grassroots social engagement with our community. And I would like to take a minute to describe what we've done here in Tarrant County. We have been operating for our social engagement committee 3 years, starting July 1st. That's when we first started. We have sponsored social and educational events for seniors, and we've probably touched the lives of about 300 to 400 people during this 3 years. Our main event is that we have a Let's Do Lunch, Let's Do Dinner event. We have 4 of these in Tarrant County each month. And we had them until, and we are located in the 4 quadrants of Tarrant County, so that every area has something that you can go to once a month. A lot of people do not drive, so they go to one of the lunch events. Some people are still working, so they go to the dinner event. And my experience is that in planning the 4 quadrants, we have some people who go to all lunch and dinner events because they don't cook. And it's a good way for them to once a week see their friends. So that's been a great program, and we are extremely sorry that we cannot get together. That's one of the things that we have all lost in this, is the ability to see our friends and go to lunch and dinner. Every month we have a handout bag, and that includes items on, there's a healthcare focus of the month. We have advocacy, financial security, and all of the things that are in our mission we put in our handout bag, and just spread the word on different activities and social events. We have an annual holiday kickoff party in November, and we have a Valentine party in February. So those are some of our biggest events. We have had an annual healthcare benefits review for the last 3 years. And that goes over all of the upcoming Medicare annual enrollment information so that we update all of our members, our community on Medicare. We also have, for the last 2 years, a Social Security and Medicare 101 event so that people who are planning their retirement, who are not yet on Medicare, can learn about Medicare and Social Security and perhaps not make some of the mistakes that maybe perhaps some of us have made in making our choices for after we're 65 and older. We also, in 2018, one of our biggest endeavors as a coalition was to publish the North Texas LGBT-friendly senior housing guide. And this is a very important guide in that our housing committee has gone in and visited with a number of facilities in our area, which are independent living, assisted living facilities. And when we started this, we did not have any idea how many people would actually be interested in this. I believe the numbers are that we had 17 that were featured in our first publication, but we had about 25 different facilities that were interested, and we literally didn't have the personnel to train all of those facilities. But we do train the facilities in our in the LGBTQ plus community, much as what Sophia introduced us to. Who are we? You know, what do we need? How can you assist our community? And what are we looking for in a place that we live every day? So that has been a great program, and we are updating that, which will be published. And this is now online at cfa.lgbt, and you can find that guide online, and it will be online from in the future. And we think that this next section will be probably late 2020 now, because we've had some delays because they're busy and we can't get in there to train or to talk to them. So we look forward to that because that's a great publication for the area. We also, I think one of the greatest things that we have done is that we have introduced our community at large and the senior community to our organizations, our community service organizations, our nonprofit organizations, the churches in the area. And I personally am a part of the Area Agency on Aging for Tarrant County and have a lot of colleagues that have a great deal more understanding about our community than they did before we were there to make presentations and to actually become a part of our community. We are a part of our community. And so we need to get out there and, sit at the table and make friends and advocate for our senior citizens and for our community as a whole. We have a key online resources that is very helpful, I believe, because it includes most of the organizations that we communicate with, HRC, Equality Texas, AARP, of course. And so I will provide that to Sophia for a handout after the conclusion of this program. So that is generally what we have done with the coalition. I do want to talk for a moment about COVID-19 and the LGBT community. Our community shares all of the issues shared by the general public, and we are particularly vulnerable, I believe, because we have a lot of the comorbid conditions that make us vulnerable to any kind of virus. So we, the seniors 60 and over, we are officially identified by the Centers for Disease Control as vulnerable individuals. So we had the privilege of first getting used to becoming seniors, which meant some people had a hard time with. And now we are called vulnerable individuals. I personally have not taken that on. I just choose to protect myself and hope that I will not be vulnerable to this disease. But we do have, due to age and comorbid health conditions, the list that the CDC puts out, the heart problems, the pulmonary, and especially diabetes. So we are vulnerable to that. LGBT individuals, and particularly the transgender population, are often underemployed due to discrimination. We lack the financial resources many times to have medical insurance, acceptance by physicians, and we have food insecurities and lack proper nutrition. So all of these things, in addition to not having a good social network and being separated from our family and friends, or perhaps being forced to live in a situation that is not good for our mental and our physical health, we are very vulnerable. I think the best resource that I could send all of you to on the impact of the coronavirus is to the Human Rights Campaign. HRC has done a wonderful document, and it's called The Lives and Livelihoods of Many in the LGBTQ Community Are at Risk Amidst the COVID-19 Crisis. And you can go into the hrc.org website and look up coronavirus, and they have many publications on that site about how this virus is impacting our community. The last thing that I want to talk about, I told Sophia I was going to throw this in my professional life. I'm a registered health information administrator and have worked in health facilities for many years. And I'm currently on the legislative committee for the Texas Health Information Management Association. Our association is the end of medicine that takes care of the HIPAA privacy laws for our healthcare. And we have done a guide to HIPAA civil rights and COVID-19. One of the things that, as many of you may know, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and the privacy rule, as we call it, addresses the use and disclosure of individual health information called protective health information. And there are very strict rules for facilities not to release your health information unless you give them permission to do so. So that's what the HIPAA rule is about. We are living in an area of what we call emergency declarations. And between January 31st and March 11th, various organizations declared national public health emergencies or national emergencies. The first one was the Department of Health and Human Services in the US. They declared on January 31st a national public health emergency. And then the president declared a nationwide emergency on March 1st. And the World Health Organization declared the pandemic on March 11th. I want to just tell you for a moment something about how HIPAA works in this national emergency, because I think it's important to know your rights should you go to a health facility. The outbreak imposes additional challenges on healthcare providers. Questions arise about abilities of the HIPAA-covered entities, hospitals, nursing homes, etc., to share information, including with friends, family, public health officials, and emergency personnel. The HIPAA privacy rule allows patient information to be shared to assist in a nationwide public health emergency and to assist patients in receiving care. The HIPAA privacy rule, however, is not suspended during the national emergency. Health facilities can't just do what they want with your information, and they are bound to guard this information. A couple of things that I want to mention here in particular is about media access to protected health information. I believe this is important for those of you in the social work arena to know, because most often you are the ones who are paying attention to media. You are the ones who are communicating with the patients or the patient's families, most likely. And under HIPAA, the covered entities cannot give media and film crews access to facilities where patient protected health information is in any form. A patient authorization would need to be obtained. And again, we're talking about our health facilities that are under great stress, but they cannot just let the news media in to film anywhere they want. I often look at television at night and see these sometimes close-ups of patients, and I wonder every time, did you sign the HIPAA form to give authorization for your picture to be on this news media? So I worry about that, but it is not okay to do that. One of the things that I will end with is the general HIPAA guidance and provision, and this is extremely important to the social work community because it is has to do with disclosure of a person's health information to family, friends, and others involved in individual care. And it says a covered entity should get verbal permission from the individuals or otherwise be able to infer that the patient does not object to release of their protected health information. The patient, as you know, may not be able to talk. They may not be able to communicate, but there should be, you should endeavor to get their verbal permission. A covered entity may disclose protected health information to persons involved in the patient's care and to notify them of the patient's location, general condition, or death. This would include, where necessary, to notify others, the police, the press, or the public at large. And covered entities may share protected health information with disaster relief organizations such as the American Red Cross. So in a situation where a patient is in ICU on a ventilator, or perhaps they just aren't communicating well, they can talk to your family, they can talk to your friends, because those are the people that are generally responsible for your care before and after you were in the facility. So they can talk to people, and they can talk to the Red Cross, because sometimes the American Red Cross are the ones who would come and talk to family to let them know that a person is even in a hospital. So I believe those are some of the things that I wanted to bring to this group, because you do have those opportunities under a national emergency with HIPAA about communicating with families on behalf of the patients. And sometimes that is just necessary. I want to end with a thought that when we talk about advocacy in our community, I believe that the biggest advocate that we have is you and your vote. And I want to show you my business card. I don't know how well you can see this. I had these printed up at the beginning of the year because I think the most important thing that we can do perhaps this year is to vote. Early voting is starting. We'll have a national election on November 3rd, and I encourage everyone to register to vote and to get the mail-in ballots, because I believe they're approved here in Texas right now. So I'll end with that. I want to thank you for your attention, and thank you for the panel being here today, and for Sophia for sponsoring and organizing this. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Jane. And for anybody who wants those resources that Jane was talking about, the School of Social Work can definitely get those out and disseminate that information, but such powerful words. So thank you so much for being on the panel and for speaking.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, I'm going to introduce Liam Rhodes, pronouns he, him, his. He is a sophomore psychology major entering his first year as a Pride peer. Welcome, Liam.
Hello, sorry, I could not find the unmute thing. It was covered up. So thank you, Sophia, for the opportunity to be on this, and Jessica and Jane. Literally the whole time y'all were talking, I was like just learning so much. And like Jessica said, I got goosebumps as well from Sophia's introduction. For me, I think this whole process, like I've learned a lot more during all the protests and being in quarantine, I've learned a lot about the community in 4 months than I have in almost 20 years of being alive. I live in an area that's it's progressive, but there's not a lot of diversity. So for me, when I was in high school, I was pretty much the only one that was open about it, with the exclusion for a couple people that I knew. And I just didn't really know anybody until I got to college. And one of the first days at the activity fair, the LGBT plus had a table, and like that was just kind of my first introduction. Like they were just the nicest people. They had all this information that like on pamphlets and flyers and different events. They're like, oh, come out to this event. And I think just being on an area where there's so much diversity and acceptance pushed me to want to advocate more for that. And I think with the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, I've learned a lot about the Stonewall and how it was started by Black trans women. And I've learned a lot about those specific women. And I think it's incredible. And it makes me think back and just wishing that I had known more about it before, instead of having to learn it through like a tweet online or a Facebook post, but like rather my own research, like through an article or a documentary. And I think during this time, especially since we can't really go out and do anything, I think now is a good time to start educating yourselves on these different issues, especially with the LGBT community and what they face, especially now. Because like Sophia said about they're trying to roll back healthcare privileges for trans people. And I like, that's not okay. Because I everyone's human. And like Jessica's shirt says, if you can see it, we're all human. It doesn't matter who you fall in love with. People are people. It does not matter the gender, the sexuality. I think everyone needs to be treated with kindness and equality. And I think there's been progress in the last couple years and months of that acceptance and that equality that's been fought for 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, however long. And I think there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made with all these issues going on. I think now, especially with just everyone kind of not knowing what to do with the uncertainty that we're facing with the pandemic, I think now is a good time to start advocating for those rights and those, like Jane said, to go out and vote or get the mail-in ballot and vote to protect this community and the rights that they deserve. And I don't have much to say. Everyone's already said amazing things, so it's hard to follow up after 3 spectacular speakers. So I'll end it on that. Just if you're not, like if you don't feel like you're educated enough, which I believe that nobody's fully educated on a topic, you can always learn more. Start getting educated and start like just kind of taking that information in, because the more you know about it and the more that you can advocate and help get these issues fixed so that we don't have to worry about them and worry about the next generation having to worry about it, then I think we'll move towards a better society and a better world that is just where we don't have to live in fear or just be scared to hold hands with someone in public or be your true self. So I think that's where I'll end my statement.
Thank you, Liam. That was beautiful. And you ended so well with the urge to get educated. You did great. Don't worry. Let's all give a virtual round of applause to Liam. Next, we have Justin Sandoval, pronouns he, him, his. He is a junior studying social work here at UTA. Take it away, Justin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. kind of going more off a little bit of my introduction, my name is Justin. I'm also a Pride peer working with the LGBTQ plus program. I've been a Pride peer for about 3 semesters now. With the COVID-19 pandemic and kind of how that's impacted my life in particular, I'm lucky enough to have a family who accepts me and kind of validates my identity. And I have also had the experience of, I currently live on campus. Although I do not live in a dorm, I live in one of the on-campus apartments. So we had the choice on whether or not we wanted to stay or end our leases early and move out. Though I did have friends who identified within the community who had to be faced with that decision whether or not they wanted to stay, or whether they were able to stay or they had to go home. A lot of these young people had to kind of adjust with the fact if they were to go home, they wouldn't have the community that they had built here. I know for me, whenever I moved, transitioning from high school to college, it was a huge shift in the people that I was just the diversity in and the queer spaces that I could actually become involved in. I know that my friend group is almost entirely identifies within the community, and so for people to have to move back home and not have that community would be really rough, especially not even being able to visit because everybody has to stay quarantined. Some of the work that we've been doing within the LGBTQ plus program is trying to facilitate just some of that community with we would do bi-weekly Zoom calls so people could form connections. We're actually having an event tonight through Mavs Unite that will be showing a documentary kind of to end Pride Month as we've been celebrating it. One thing that I've noticed and that I actually think it's benefited us through the COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, and being myself a person of color, the queer community kind of advocating for queer spaces specifically for people of color. So a lot of people who are people of color don't really have that sense of community with other people who identify the same as them. And so that's one thing that I've noticed through the thick and the thin that I feel like will grow going forward, and that we will make sure to have these queer spaces for people of color. I don't know. I think I would like to end with that. I hope that all of you are staying safe, and I hope that everyone can kind of take this time to not only reflect on what's happening in the world, but reflect on yourself and kind of almost going off of what Liam said, educating yourself on various topics and kind of just seeing, trying to stay hopeful for the future.
Thank you, Justin. Words of hope. I like that you ended it on there. Next, we have Devin Box, pronouns they, them. Devin will be graduating with their MSW from UTA this summer with research and clinical interest in LGBTQ plus youth. They are a cat enthusiast and enjoy playing piano. Take it away, Devin.
Hey everybody, happy Pride. Thank you again, Sophia, for putting this together. I'm super excited to be part of this and to hear so many diverse voices. I identify as a queer, trans, and non-binary person. And I want to take a second in light of, as we think about the history of Stonewall and we think about the intersections of race and privilege, I just want to take a second to just verbalize and acknowledge that my white privilege has protected me from a lot of the discrimination that disproportionately affects our siblings of color in the community, particularly Black trans women. And so as I share my own lived experience as a queer trans non-binary person, I just want to acknowledge that my white privilege protects me from a lot of the oppression that impacts our siblings of color disproportionately. So that being said, I was just going to share a couple of things that kind of stand out to me as far as like my experience of my gender identity within the context of this pandemic. So, I mean, obviously we're all having like changes in how we interact with each other, right? With the stay at home, shelter in place orders, and just trying to limit contact with one another. For me, that's kind of been a blessing in disguise. Being a trans person in Texas is not easy, being out in public, and especially in a state where my gender isn't even legally recognized. Like I can't get a gender marker on ID that accurately reflects my gender. And so a lot of kind of like the daily stresses that I face are, you know, the microaggressions, like being misgendered constantly, having to feel hyper vigilant and like checking my surroundings for safety, and then navigating, you know, public restrooms and trying to find like a safe place that I can use a public restroom. So those are kind of, I would say, my top 3 stressors as a trans person, like being in public. And so just by virtue of us having some of those stay at home and shelter in place orders, those stressors have gone down dramatically. And I'm fortunate to be able to share a home with my wife, who is my biggest ally, and to feel safe at home. I know that that's not the case for many in our community, and that certainly was not always the case for me. And so I feel very fortunate to be able to call home, you know, a safe place that I can go to. Another area that really stands out for me is just I think community and being able to connect with one another in creative ways is a really big strength of our community, right? Like a lot of us have had to patch together a chosen family and find creative ways to connect with one another. And the research actually bears out that connection is a really big part of our resilience as LGBTQ plus people. And so I'm so glad to see more supportive events moving online and hopefully giving access to people who maybe didn't have access to some of that support before. And then the last point I just wanted to touch on, which I know has been brought up, is the experience of navigating healthcare. When that, you know, ruling came out regarding trans healthcare kind of hit me like, you know, a punch in the gut. It was really hard to hear because I've certainly experienced providers who are either just ignorant, where I have to like do a whole gender 101 breakdown and like explain and sort of defend my identity, to those who are just not affirming or treat me differently, or trans exclusionary healthcare policies where I haven't been able to get certain medical steps in my transition covered. And so pre-COVID, that was already kind of a rough path for me. And I just feel like it's been kind of intensified with the virus, with everybody being on edge and everything. And actually, just to share a little experience I had, like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was having some significant health problems and had to go to the ER multiple times and see some new specialists. And of course, like in an emergency situation, you don't have time to research like where's the nearest trans-friendly ER, right? And it all kind of depends on who the attending is, and you just don't know what you're gonna get. And so just having a lot of anxiety with that. You know, I had, you know, people were having to interact with my chest and put on the little EKG stickies and worrying about, you know, them seeing my top surgery scars, knowing I'm on HRT, and does that mean they're going to treat me differently? Am I going to get the same level of care and dignity and respect and that kind of thing? And so that was just kind of an added stress to have in the midst of worrying about this really serious disease. And is that what's going on for me, or am I going to catch it here? And also worrying about like, am I going to be treated fairly and with respect? I'm healthy now, everything is fine, but that was just a tough experience to go through. And I think that's something that most trans people experience, are those healthcare disparities. And so I think as Liam was talking a little bit about like activism and educating ourselves, like I think that's a great area to focus on right now, is addressing some of those disparities. And again, just lifting up the voices in our community that are disproportionately affected by systemic discrimination. So that's all I've got. And thanks so much for letting me have the chance to share. So I'll go ahead and pass on the virtual mic now.
Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I think I can say for everybody, we're glad you're healthy and safe now. Next on our panel, we have Iris Contreras, pronouns she, her, hers. Iris is an MSW candidate with a passion for mental health and prevention programs, wanting to create awareness and policy affecting the Hispanic community. Iris?
Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well and is staying safe and healthy. When Professor Fantus invited me for the panel, I started freaking out. My anxiety went over the roof and I was like, what am I going to talk about? But I think that during this pandemic, as Devin has mentioned, to some people it has been a blessing in disguise. To others, it may not have been, because they have moved back home and maybe they are not in a supportive environment. I am blessed and privileged to be in a supportive environment. So it has helped me, particularly during this time. I lost a friend due to COVID. So during that grieving process, I noticed a shift in myself as Pride was getting closer, where my intersectionalities started to show a kind of I don't want to call it a prioritizing process, but where my intersectionalities kind of started highlighting in different ways. I am bisexual, I am Catholic, I am an undocumented DACA recipient. And at some point, you feel like your intersectionalities are being attacked. My sister's partner is African American, and there's fear in our nuclear family for different aspects of who we are. So there was just fear of the uncertainty of what was going to happen with DACA. There was fear and uncertainty of what was going to happen with our work environments because of COVID-19. There's health issues present in our family household. So it was just being super hyper focused and aware of things that we could do and couldn't do out in public, and who we interacted with, who we chose to bring into the home and who we couldn't bring into the home. With my brother-in-law, it was just, is he going to be okay? Is he going to come back home tonight safely? If he goes out and protests, is he going to be okay? Or are we going to have to go to a hospital or to the jail and pick him up? Because I personally chose to stay home due to safety concerns and the people that I interact with for my job. And my sister would go with them, or sometimes she would stay with my niece at home. So it's just a shuffling of your identities and prioritizing in different ways. And I forgot to celebrate with my chosen family for Pride. And I felt guilty. I felt guilty because I was paying attention to other parts of my intersectionalities. So I wanted to come here and be part of this panel to share my experience, because there might be other people out there. My focus is on mental health. So that's where I go to. We may feel overwhelmed because there's different things going on. And as I mentioned, your intersectionalities, it's okay for them to shift, and for some of them to take priority over something else at the moment. It's okay. We have to give ourselves permission to feel and to fear and to have hope. And I hope that that you guys are staying in touch and in contact with your support systems and with those chosen families, because even if we forget any, if we don't have the ability to go out and physically interact and share a space, we can still do so virtually. As Professor Fantus was saying, we are privileged and that technology is present in this time, and that we know how to use it. There's different events still happening for Pride, and I know there's organizations within the LGBTQ community that are still hosting events because of that importance of our social identity within our community. We still do need that communication and interaction, especially for what Liam said, for learning purposes. Some of us, we are aware of who we are and our gender identities. Some people are still new to the process, and we still have to host a safe environment for them to learn and to bring them and welcome them into our community. So with that, I just want to mention that if anybody out there needs someone to listen to them or guide them, there's organizations within the School of Social Work within UTA Arlington, and I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Therapy has helped me a lot during this time, especially with my anxiety surrounding all of my intersectionalities. Please reach out. Please reach out to somebody if you have the need. It's okay. Again, we have to give ourselves permission, especially when you feel that your identities are being attacked. I, again, hold privilege. I do not understand what our friends that are trans and that are African American are going through at the moment. It's definitely more difficult than what I am going through right now. My anxiety may not even compare. So for them to have a safe space, we have to be understanding, and we have to be educated. We have to be educated on what the Black Lives Matter movement is, and we have to be educated on all the legislation that is out there that is not only affecting us as an LGBTQ plus community, but that is affecting our other friends that have other intersectionalities that are very important to their survival and their functioning in our society. Again, my last message is to accept where you are. It's okay, and to give yourself permission to feel all the feelings that you need to feel, and to reach out for help if you need to, and to get educated and to vote. And thank you so much, everybody, for sharing today and for all the knowledge that you guys are sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We're going to move on to questions, but before we do, I just want to acknowledge some disappointing news. So we had Shannon Walker, who is the CEO of UTrans movement, to speak, and unfortunately, last minute, she couldn't make it. And so I want to acknowledge as we talk about the experiences of Black trans women, I want to acknowledge that voice is not on our panel, and the disappointment around that, and then also the acknowledgement that right now it's obvious that Black trans women are being pulled in so many different directions, and they are exhausted and fighting every single day. And so what I would end with is, although it was essentially important to have her as part of the panel, and another student who couldn't participate last minute as well, that it is on us now to educate ourselves, to learn, to use resources, to understand what's going on, and to work as anti-racist allies within the cause of intersectionality and understanding trans women of color and their space. And so I hope that this is just the first of many panels, and I hope we have opportunities to learn from trans women of color, to include their voices and perspectives, because it is so essential and so important. And I apologize for that and the obvious lack of that perspective and voice within the panel. It was not intentional. There was not enough time to have an additional person here, but I don't want to end the panel without recognizing that and addressing that. And so with that, I'd like to move on to questions and answers that anybody has. As I said, there's a Q&A button at the end of your Zoom if you want to use that, or on Facebook Live, you can use the comment section as well if you have any type of questions. And so I will start with Zoom and then I will move to Facebook. So this question is for Jane. With COVID-19 still going on and nursing homes limiting visitors or not letting anyone in, how do we visit and love on these individuals that need affection?
Thank you very much for that question. The answer is that yes, COVID-19 is still going on in nursing homes. I was just on a discussion the other day about this and the status of it. There was a mandate in the state of Texas that all nursing home residents and staff members be tested. I know that that is in process. We were unable to get statistics on that, so I do not know if that is completed or not. Yes, the nursing home residents are essentially quarantined. The nursing homes are really closed down to visitors. You have seen on television that if you really wanted to visit people, sometimes you can do so by going to the windows. I would encourage everyone, if you want to do something and you may not even know anyone in a nursing home, is to get a greeting card and take greeting cards to the residents. Call the nursing homes, ask if you might bring those over. Just something to cheer people up. I will tell you my personal experience in this. My brother-in-law had cancer, and he was the very last day before they shut the nursing homes down. He was in respite care, and he was there, and we were glad that he was safe and not in his home alone, but we were unable to visit with him. He died about 8 days later, and we did go to the nursing home and were there when the funeral service took his body out. So we were able to say our goodbyes. I also had an aunt who was in a nursing home way out in West Texas, Crane. She had some very underlying conditions. This was about 4 weeks ago. One of the staff members, I will give accolades to her nursing home because they kept everyone safe. And then about a month ago, they had a staff member who turned positive, infected a resident, and several of the residents are COVID positive. My aunt was one of them. My aunt did pass on about 2 weeks later, not of COVID, but due to her underlying conditions. So that's a very upfront and personal situation to me. So the answer is yes, that this is still going on. There has been a great deal of effort on the part of the nursing homes to stop this, to protect residents. But, once this kind of thing gets started, it's really hard to contain. And while I'm on, I just want to thank all of the panelists. You are a great group of people. This is one of the best, definitely the best Zoom I've been on. One of the best panels. I think the compassion and just the intelligence and the courage to be out there and to share yourselves with our community is great. And I just applaud all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. This question, I think, would probably also be to Jane, but maybe others know the answer. Are there virtual classes being offered involving educating individuals about Medicare and Social Security?
I do not know the answer to that. I know that we have an annual Social Security and 101 program that we usually do. We're discussing now the availability of the people who do that and whether or not we're going to go forward with that. If we do that, it certainly will be open, and I will inform Sophia of that availability for you.
I know DCHHS, Dallas County Health and Human Services, and SAMHSA, they have, I believe it's like a mini series of videos that have information on Medicaid and all the programs, Medicaid, Medicare, WIC, Social Security, whether it be SSI or SSDI. So I can send that over if anybody needs access to those.
Thank you.
That would be great. And then I think a similar question to visiting, which Jane, you might have answered, but is it allowed to form groups of, quadrants in the same areas to visit at the windows to form some hope or give some love to those in nursing homes where we can't actually go in?
Yes, I think you would contact the nursing home and tell them that you're interested in visiting and see what their arrangements can be.
Great, thank you. I think those are all the questions. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask them now. But I would like to I really want to end by thanking not only our panelists for their, bravery and courage in terms of speaking and educating and informing us about everything that's going on, but to all of you who are watching over Zoom and Facebook Live. Part of your attendance is taking that first step and educating yourself and being here and caring and being passionate. And it is one step of advocacy is coming to this panel. And so I thank each and every one of you for taking time out of a busy day. I know 12 to 1:30 is kind of right in that middle of that day. It's Tuesday. We're right in the middle of the work week. It's right before, the long weekend, but thank you so much for everyone. Your passion and dedication is truly remarkable. And we hope that this is just the first of many more panels to come to talk about these type of issues. And we know we've just scratched the surface on so many other things to talk about. So really, I thank each and every one of you for being here. And thank you so much again to our incredible panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, wait, there's one more question, I think. A last minute. Oh, there's a few more questions. People were waiting until I said goodbye. Okay, so we have a question. Are there services available for, this might be for Jessica. I just want to clarify to someone to ask, or Justin might also know the answer. Are there services available for incoming freshmen who are questioning, especially since we'll be virtual for the most part? So are there going to be services available for those who might be questioning their sexual gender identity? And as most things will probably be virtual on campus, will there be virtual sort of resources and services available?
Yes, there absolutely will be. Pride Peers do a huge part of programming because I think it's important that students are taking up as much space as possible, right? And so they will actually, Pride Peers are responsible for facilitating the LGBTQ+ connection support group. So that is their event that will absolutely happen bi-weekly, virtually, no matter what. Right now, we are still working out what social distancing guidelines look like for folks that possibly are on campus or will, be commuting for a class, and what programming will look like. But we are very much prepared to absolutely go 100% online, or I am designing programming that is allowed to be virtually or in person as well. That way we can kind of go either way. And Sophia, I do want to highlight, I accidentally answered a couple questions like during, and one of the main questions was, can folks volunteer at UT Arlington with the LGBTQ+ program? And you absolutely can. One of our biggest events that is being pushed to the spring semester is our drag show, which is a 700 person plus event that ends up being standing room only. And the more volunteers we can have, the better. Again, our Pride peers are emceeing that whole show all the way through and introducing our drag queens and kings. So please reach out to the program LGBTQA@uta.edu, and I would very much love for you to be a part of the team.
Yay. I think, yes, volunteer, be a part of the team. The drag show is amazing. We do have another question. Let me just pull it up. As a white MSW student seeking to elevate voices of Black members of the LGBTQ+ community, what advocacy groups can you recommend to listen and learn? Does anybody want to take that? There are, so the U Trans movement with Shannon Walker is one that's held in Dallas. She does a lot of work, not only for the trans movement, but also particularly among Black, not only trans women of color, but Black trans men of color. So she does a lot of work around that. And hopefully in the future, we can have a panel with her sitting on it. There are also more federal, I would say, organizations and advocacy groups. Jessica, you're nodding. Do you want to?
I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Being that this person is a student, I think it's really, and kind of echoing what Liam was saying earlier about this is our time, you know, if anything, not a more ideal time to educate really ourselves, right? And I think the one thing that in the conversations that I have been having with faculty, staff, students, colleagues alike, is we need to start citing Black authors in academia, Black trans women who are doing this work, Latinx trans women who are doing this work, trans folks as a whole, right? And preventing the whitewashing that has very much happened and getting back to who was actually doing this work, who is publishing this work. Laverne Cox, that's, you know, we're doing the disclosure, Netflix Pride Watch Party tonight, is the executive director, producer, quoting folks who are actually doing the work. And I was trying to pull up my support or the resource list that I put together. And so I was just nodding my head as an absolutely yes, but that is one thing that we can do as well to elevate voices, is educate ourselves and taking it back to crediting folks who are actually doing the work.
Thank you, Jessica. I think that's really important. And I would include that of reading. And now with, you know, Black Lives Matter has been around for a really long time, obviously, but now with the current protests, there's a lot of anti-racist resources out there. Some of them are more general than I would say that to connecting them to the LGBTQ+ community, but you will find resources out there, even if you just even if you're a whiz with computers, Googling it, there are tons of not only anti-racist resources, but as well books written by Black members of the LGBTQ+ community, memoirs, support services, resources that you can become accustomed to. And if people are interested in that, Jessica and I can work together, as well as some other folks, to put together a resource list for folks if they're interested.
And Sophia, if I could just add to that, I know of a couple organizations that are more Dallas-based, I believe, but just organizations that could really elevate those voices and that we could help advocate for. One is the House of Rebirth, and that is geared towards Black trans women, led by Black trans women. Great resource, providing a lot of social support, even housing, other needs for Black trans women specifically. So I would recommend them as a resource if you're looking specifically for an organization to connect with and to advocate for. I'm also aware of the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, which you can look up on Facebook, and they do a lot of great work in the community too.
Thank you.
There's also the Black Alliance for Just Immigrants. It's an organization that I also follow because of my focus on immigration. But that organization does a lot of great work with LGBTQ+ community that are refugees or are immigrants. So that's also an organization to look out for if anybody is looking for more information with those intersectionalities.
Thank you. Those were all really good resources, and we can put together, if those attendees are interested, I can gather up all those sort of information with the websites and contact information for everybody to have kind of a resource list for the organizations that were mentioned, as well as the resources and things like that. Any other final questions, comments before I kind of wrap up and do a last minute announcement? Okay, well, thank you again. Maybe if I say thank you one more time, there'll be more questions, but thank you again to everybody. This panel was put together very last minute. So I will thank, a huge thank you is indeed given to the communications department at the UTA School of Social Work. They did a phenomenal job making a poster in like a day, making sure the panelists knew what was going on, sending the Zoom invites, sending all the ads out to Mavwire and Facebook, and doing everything just so quickly and being so responsive to my millions of emails. So thank you to our entire communications team. You are all wonderful. We will send out the contact information of panelists if that is okay with them. I'm going to ask them afterwards if that's okay with them to share it. If any of you have direct questions to some of the panelists or want to hear more, let's say about the advocacy program, or if you want to hear more about the Coalition for Aging, things like that, you will get their contact information as well as some of the websites that we've talked about. In closing, the School of Social Work is continuing to do incredible work and incredible advocacy work. So our next virtual panel discussion will be held, hold on, let me get that date because it's in another, is part 2 of 3 of our panel series. Part 1 was last week. Part 2 will be July 10th at 2 p.m. It is our COVID-19 diversity and social work practices. The second presentation in our 3-part series will offer practice-based reflections on how social workers are meeting the challenges of COVID-19. For more details, follow the UTA School of Social Work Facebook, and it'll be available again over Zoom and Facebook Live. And again, Dr. Deanne Roper, who is a School of Social Work assistant professor in practice and an amazing person, has a presentation today at 2 p.m. on Cultural Humility Series, Part 1, Understanding SUD Disparities Among LGBTQIA People. You can go to the School of Social Work Facebook page for more information if you would like to sit in another virtual panel at 2 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody. We will send out information if you are so inclined to get it. And I thank again all the attendees and the panelists for being here this afternoon and taking up time to learn more. Thank you all.